If in design nothing is ever done by chance, it will follow then that color choices are also very deliberate, very calculated. Color, because of its communicative properties above and beyond just its visual properties, has meaning. It is important to select color schemes that are going to be meaningful to the target audience. So a color scheme can be defined as a meaningful, balanced relationship of color based on the 12-hue circle. And we use color schemes to eliminate guessing. Now, not all color schemes need to be balanced, but if they're not based on a balanced geometric construct, then there needs to be a really good reason for it. So what we're going to do is look at the geometric constructs, things like triangles, squares, rectangles that sit within that hue circle. And anything outside of that is not out of bounds in terms of your color determination. But what you need to keep in mind is the purpose of the design, the end user, get your own color propensities out of the way. So basically, we have two categories of balanced color schemes or harmonious color schemes. Related color schemes are those that follow the definition that related schemes or related color relationships follow when we're dealing with simultaneous contrast. You have a single primary, or you have no more than two primaries and one of them is held in common among the hues. Contrasting color schemes are made up of those hues that sit across the hue circle from each other, and all three primaries would be present, or you have two primaries independent of each other. The first related color scheme we'll talk about is an achromatic scheme, so anything that has black and white and grays. It's a related color scheme because there's no hue to it whatsoever. Therefore, it can't do anything but relate to itself. Very compelling. Achromatic color schemes can be very striking. And here's another one. A monochromatic color scheme is defined as a related scheme that is made up of one hue. So obviously one hue can be a single primary, or it can be a hue that is a compound hue made up of two primaries. So here we've chosen orange, and we have the full-bodied, normal value, fully saturated orange. We have a shade and several tints. Monochromatic color schemes and any other chromatic color schemes can also have achromatics. Again, it's the extent that makes it an achromatic scheme versus a monochromatic scheme. Analogous color schemes will be hues that are related to each other. So they would sit side by side, they would share a primary. And so here we have a shaded orange, we have an orange, we have a yellow orange, and we have a yellow, and we have a tinted yellow. So all of these have both red and yellow in them. If we added red, depending upon the proportions used, we would no longer be analogous because red and yellow don't have anything in common. So here's a logo that is created with a blue and a toned green. And so we have two primaries. In the blue we've got blue, in the green we have blue and yellow. It is an analogous scheme. Here's another analogous scheme running from red into orange. There are other colors going on, but the overall understanding is an analogous scheme. When you're looking at a color scheme, you want to look at the overall impression. So you can have an analogous scheme that might have an opposing accent color here and there, but you want to look at the extent or the proportion of everything, and that will determine the scheme construct. Accented neutrals are made up of chromatic neutrals, but they have accents of more vivid color, or they have accents of achromatics. So here we have earth tones, and we have a gray and a black, and we have a red and green complementary pair, and they're smaller in proportion. The achromatics here and the fully saturated color acts as the accents, Neutral schemes can be very soothing, but they can also be very dull. So very often you want to pop a more chromatic color into the scheme just to liven it up. This is kind of a postmodern take in terms of a design sensibility. It is earth tones, and then we have accents of white and black. So this is a case where we have achromatics doing the accenting. Rembrandt used accented neutrals. In Jesus with the lifted hand, he's got a blue robe, he's got a red sash. They're not fully saturated. They are neutralized in appearance. The flesh tones, of course, all flesh tones, by the way, are neutrals, no matter what your ethnic persuasion. And the accents here are in the lighter, almost white. And this, by the way, is Rembrandt's Raising of Lazarus. Opposing color schemes, the first obvious one would be complementary, where you're dealing with all three primaries present in that complementary pair. And again, you can have black, white, and gray involved in the color scheme without changing the schematic. This is showing a very pale green, a warm red, a slightly shaded balanced red, and a cool red. So here's a complementary color scheme. We have red and green. In this Diebenkorn, the complement is yellow and violet. A split complementary is a dyad. A dyad is a color scheme made up of two hues. A split complementary takes the hue and one of the hues that are adjacent to the direct complement. So if this is red and this is green, then red split complements would be blue-green and yellow-green. So if we take red and yellow-green, we would have a split complementary. If we take all three, we have a different construct. And notice that when you take the red with a split complement and you draw a straight line between them, you are bypassing the center of the hue circle. So here we have the reds and a shaded blue-green and blue-green fully saturated. And that would be a split complement. This is a split complementary. We have yellow-green and we have a variety of reds. We have a very cool red, almost a fuchsia, and we have warm reds that are full-bodied and tinted. A triad has two options to it, and both of those options are triangles. Here on the left, we have an equilateral triangle, meaning that you've got three hues existing equally spaced on the hue circle. You can spin this any which way you want. So you can have the three primaries, or you can have the three secondaries. You can have the violet, the orange, and the green. So this is option B for a triad. We pull things in one, so we're doing an isosceles triangle within that hue circle. And again, you can spin that any which way, as long as you have this configuration. So here we have the hue and both split complements. Very famous triad. This Van Gogh, which if you're in Los Angeles, this is at the Getty Center, and if you can see it in person, it really is an amazing piece. But it is violet, green, and orange, so it is the secondary triad. And of course, Vermeer did a lot of primary triad color schemes. Now you can modify your triad into a partial triad. If you start with the equilateral triangle in the hue circle and remove one of the hues, you have a partial triad. You've got two hues instead of three. So the red-yellow here is a partial triad. A tetrad is four hues, and you have two options. You've got the square inscribed in the circle here. So you have four hues that are equally spaced. Or you have two sets of complements, but they are not adjacent to each other. They're not contiguous. So you create a rectangle within that hue circle. red and green and yellow and violet. It does use some other colors. We can see there's a fade from the yellow all the way into the violet going around the warm side of the hue circle. But that is a secondary issue to the domination of the yellow and violet and then the red and green. And this is vintage 60s, so remember the simultaneous and complementary contrast from the previous lecture and how that caused the visual effects that made psychedelic art what it was. A partial tetrad, you remove one of the hues. This is what I call the catch-all, because if it isn't one of the others we've already talked about, pretty much you can guarantee it's a hexad, especially if the design is full color. So with a hexad, you are taking 6 hues that are equally spaced around the hue circle, and you have 2 options: the primaries and secondaries together as a hexad, or you can take all the tertiaries together as a hexad. Now you can remove a few hues and have a partial hexad as long as that construct doesn't then become something else. It doesn't become, say, a tetrad, or it doesn't become a triad. So everything that appears to be full color and appears to have a full palette, that would be a hexad, such as this. Obviously the blue dominates, but we've got red and we've got yellow, we have orange, we have yellow-green. Don't really have a green in here, so it is a partial hexad.